Hello and welcome to today's video. Today a fun one I've been wanting to do for a while. So I review a lot of inks, and of course obviously when I review those inks I know what they are. I wanted to try doing a blind ink review. And so what I did was I reached out to Pulp Addiction, the retailer here in Australia, and they were awesome, like beyond awesome, and got on board with this video idea, and they sent me out this little bundle of ink samples and 5 envelopes. So there are 5 ink samples here, and each vial just has a number on it. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then 5 corresponding envelopes. So my plan, these envelopes, they're going over to the side. They're out of the way for the moment. My plan is to do a mini review of each of these inks. So on camera right now, I'm going to swatch them up. Then I'm just on Tomoe River paper. Then I'm going to go away and I'm going to write on different kinds of paper with them. I'm going to talk about how they feel. I'm going to talk about how they perform. And all of that is going to be done without knowing what the ink is. Obviously, I'm going to know the color, but I'm not going to know what actual ink it is. So I'm going to do all these writing samples with this, which is the James Finnis Robert Oster Serendipity, which is a dip pen that uses a fountain pen feed and nib. So we'll get a fairly decent, if not slightly wet, representation of the inks. But we will get a good idea of what they are, how they perform. I'll then pass a little bit of judgment on them from those tests. And then, one by one, we'll reveal what they are using these beautifully done envelopes. Like, I have to say a big thank you here to Pulp Addiction for getting on board with this little idea for this video. I'm really excited about it. So, let's start swatching up these inks. This is the Bond Travel Gear notebook I always use for my ink reviews, a book that's sadly no longer available, but uses the old stock 68 GSM Tomoe River paper. So I'm going to do these 5 swatches, and then I'll give me a space to write with the inks and do water tests and all those standard things I do. So let's start with number 1 here. So this is just a swatch to see what colors we have without knowing what the actual ink is. So what we have here is a navy grey, blue-black kind of colour. It's got a lot of depth to it, and it looks good on Tomoe River paper. So we'll be able to see what it looks like on all the other kinds of paper at the end of this video. Let's see what 2 is. Okay, so 2 is a rusty brown kind of ink. Lots of shading there, once again, lots of depth. It's a nicely saturated red rusty brown. Now ink number 3. Wow, super vibrant yellow orange. Gosh, there's a lot of vibrancy to that ink. That's beautiful. So 4 here. Ooh. This is my kind of color. The rich sort of almost burgundy red brown here. That's absolutely lovely. Okay. And then lastly, number 5 here. Let's see what we have. Okay, this is good. This is I wouldn't say it's a blue-black. It's almost it's got a slight tealy kind of undertone, but it's a rich dark blue. Yeah, with perhaps a bit of a tealy sort of undertone to it. I like that. It looks like it's got a nice bit of sheen on it. If we go back to the first one here, once it's now started to dry a bit more, we have a very nice dark grey. It's dried much grayer there. And then we've got a rusty browny sort of red, orange red. a bright, vibrant yellow-orange, which actually is shading up quite nicely. Then this sort of more burgundy red or red-brown, and then a lovely dark, rich, tealy, almost blue-black. It's actually drying a lot more blue-black, like on the tealy end of blue-black, with some red sheen coming through. So those are the 5 inks in swatch form. I'm going to go away. It's going to take me a couple of days just to sort of, plot through all this ink by ink. I'll be writing on student notepad paper, copy paper, Rhodia, and of course on the Tomahawk River here, doing a water test and just putting down some thoughts about the ink. As I said, I'll be using the Serendipity pen here from James Finnis, Robert Oster. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what they do, and then we'll reveal what the inks are. So blind ink test number 1, phase 1 complete. Phase 2. So I've done up the writing samples over the last few days. I have it on a couple of different kinds of paper, and then of course here on the Tomahawk River as well. Let's start by looking at them on the lower end paper. So we have here student notepad paper. This is like student lecture notepad paper. The colors all look really great. Now I did misread this last color a little bit when I put it down wet. It's not as blue as I thought. It's more tealy green with a rich red sheen, and I don't know if it'll show up on the camera, but some shimmer, which is really neat. So it's like a bronzy red shimmer. It's interesting. But all the colors look really nice. The yellow there tends to run a little light. And then we've got a really lovely sort of brown red and this more purpley burgundy red, and then the rich dark blue at the top there. On this paper, there's a little bit of feathering from ink sample number 1. There's a bit more from ink sample number 2, just occasionally. Number 3 actually holds together fairly well. Number 4 has the most feathering and spread of any of them. And number 5 is actually probably one of the better performed, except for where it puts down a bit more ink. On the reverse, they all sort of come out around the same. I would say that ink number 2 there is probably the best performing on this paper. 1 and 4 are doing okay. 5 is good, once again, except for there's lots down. It's actually very good in the lighter parts of the ink. So if you're using a fine nib, for instance, or a dry pen, that would be quite fine. And number 3 there, the yellows come through quite a lot. That's quite a wet ink from what I've been able to gather. Now we have it on, this is 80 GSM copy paper, sort of standard office copy paper. Colors are great. The yellow is more readable here. You got more of the green. These muted tones on this non-fountain pen friendly paper really bring out some, sort of like the lighter shades of the ink. So we actually can see like a good color idea of what they are. So this, almost blue black, this nice rusty brown, bright yellow, the burgundy red there, and then the tealy green. And some of the shimmer is showing up on this paper, but not a whole lot. It's hard to get some lower end papers to shimmer well. If we look at the reverse of the copy page, everything is bled through. This is not fountain pen friendly paper. Everything is bled through. But if I had to rank them in terms of how well they perform, I'd probably go 2, 5, 1, and then 4 or 5 it's a toss up. What concerns me most about number 4 actually is not just that it bleeds through, but that it actually bleeds through to a point where 3 as well, where you're going to get some like ink on the page behind it as well. So it's not just bleeding through to the point you can see it, but it's bleeding through, like actually bleeding through. So they seem to be quite wet inks. And then I've put them here on Rhodia. This is 80 GSM Rhodia paper. I've done water tests with them. I've done another swatch there, and then the standard writing. So if you look at them up nice and close, this ink looks great. There's a little bit of held behind, but not a whole lot. Enough to be able to make it out, but if you've got this wet, you're losing a lot of it. Ink number 2, it's quite saturated and spread around quite a lot. It's a fairly wet ink, but the shading is gorgeous. Absolutely lovely here. Number 3, once again, it's a lighter shading ink, and in the lighter shading, we start to see some bits that start to become a little less legible, and this lost a lot of its, its color when we got it wet. But that's quite normal with light shading inks and light inks of brighter, more vibrant colors. And then we get a really lovely sense of this number 4 ink here. That's beautiful, that color. Lots of spread on the water sample, but a bit of water resistance there at the base of it, which is great. But there is a little bit of feathering here on Rhodia from this ink, particularly in like the heavier swatch parts and just a couple of spots in the writing. And then the ink number 5 looks great and it performs beautifully. Very concentrated ink, so when you get it wet, it spreads. It's not just being picked up. It just spreads around. It gets rehydrated, and once again, that shimmer looks really nice. The reverse of this Rhodia page shows that virtually nothing has come through. There's a couple of bits in the swatches from number 2 and 4, the rust and the burgundy, and then a little bit from that number 4 once again in the where we've done the writing sample, and a few dots of it, but everything else performs nicely. Nothing comes through, nothing bleeds. Before we talk about these Tomoe River pages, I just want to do a quick color comparison. So I've picked an ink that kind of shows where they sit in the color family more than like exact matches. So for this blue or black ink, I've put Diamine 1864 Blue Black, which is a blue black that leans on that purple grey end as opposed to the bluer end. And you can see there's a few similarities there. Number 2 here, I've put SBRE Brown, which is an Ackerman Diamine ink, and it's a lot browner than, so this one here it's got a reddier tone to it. Next to number 3, the yellow, we've put Robert Oster Peach, which is more orange and shades heavier and darker. Some of the lighter shades have some similarities, but you just see how bright and vibrant this ink is. Diamine Monaco Red I put next to number 4, so it's not super red. There's a lot more burgundy brown sort of tone to that, not the sort of the more vibrant red there of Monaco. And then lastly, just to show like that it's not blue, I put Diamine Oxford Blue next to this number 5. So you see that there's some of that green shading, once again, beautiful shimmer. But yes, very much not a blue like I sort of thought initially on that very first sort of swatching of it. So let's now talk through the Tomoe River page. Once again, I've done a little water test on each of them, done a little smear test of 2 at 2 seconds and 20 seconds, but I've written about each one. So number 1 here, I've said this is a nice, rich shading ink. It's got good saturation and flow, fair performance, no visible sheen, low water resistance, but I think I've actually been unfair on it there. I think it actually has some decent water resistance, and a relatively quick dry time. And that's not necessarily taken from these because they're all wet at 20 seconds, just in terms of like the swatch drying and the actual writing drying on the page. Fairly quick dry time. So number 2, awesome color. I have a feeling I know what this ink is. It feels, looks, and performs a lot like an ink that I really love. So I'll test that theory when we come to it, but I think I might know what this one is. So yeah, awesome color, nice shade, and tone to the ink. So that reddy, rusty tone I really enjoy. It's got good saturation, good performance. It was probably the best performing of the 5 inks. And then no visible sheen, low water resistance. It just moves around a lot. We lose a lot of the detail. And then medium to slow dry time. Ink number 3, I'm pretty sure I know what brand this is, but I don't know what ink it is. I will, once again, I'm testing myself. Part of the fun of this whole blind ink test was actually, trying to work out what the inks might be. Not knowing, and these inks having like similar properties and colors to some fairly sort of well-known inks, I was tossing up, would they be those or, other things. And I think, I'm one, I might have a bit of an idea. 2, I think I've got it. 3, I reckon I know the brand. But 4 and 5 are complete mysteries to me. They're inks I've never used, well, from what I can tell. So we'll have to see when I do the reveal at the end. 3 here. Okay, bright and vibrant, which is lovely. It's light on the page. So the page contrast is low. These inks are not going to be everyday writing inks. Inks like yellows and oranges and some of the lighter greens, they're not designed, well, they're not great for long-term reading, but if you're needing to mark something on a page, or you're doing artwork, or if you just want something to pop, or, you know, whatever the case may be, these kinds of inks are great, but it's very light on the page. Excellent shader, more so in the swatches and things. In the writing, it tends to be wetter ink, so you don't get a whole lot of shading. I said very wet. Low water resistance, you can see most of it's gone there. And then slow dry time after 20 seconds. It's probably, you know, the closest to the original. So that's number 3. Number 4 here, it's an interesting muted color. It's not super vibrant, it's not super dark. It's kind of like this sort of mid-tone ink that I like. It's kind of got, I don't know, almost like a vintagey kind of feel to it. So it's got good saturation, good to average performance. Like it you know, it did have some bleed and feathering and things like that. It feels slightly drier than the others on the page, like just the flow and texture of how it writes. No visible sheen, nice shade, you know, particularly, I'll show you up nice and close on this one, around the G's of the good there. You get some lovely shading in the top, it's quite nice. Some water resistance, and once again, a slow dry time. Okay, this last one, number 5, which had me stumped initially, but once I sort of saw it in natural light and all of those kinds of things, you get a bit better of a sense of it. But the sheen on this is awesome. Like, all through the writing, just that sheen. You know, this is one of those beautiful inks that sort of has the sheen, the shimmer, and the shade all sort of nailed. So, deceptive teal green. And when water gets on it and you dab that up, you get a lot of the blue come through. A lot more sort of the undertone tealy blue is apparent, which is great. Great saturation, super saturated ink, no worries there. Very sheeny, shimmer, some water resistance, like there's enough detail left there, but you do move a lot of the ink around. Fair to slow dry time, like actually it's probably quite a decent, you know, decently quick dry time really in comparison to some others. And then fair to average performance, middle of the pack in that way. You know, if I had to rank these inks in terms of performance, I would go 1, 2 or 3, and then 4 or 5. They're sort of toying between the two. They've all got strengths and weaknesses that pull them in those directions. But they're all lovely inks, they're all beautiful, vibrant colours, and they all look great on the page. So now I think it's time for phase 3. Okay, phase 3 involves these awesome envelopes here from Pulp Addiction. I'm going to open up each one at a time, and then I'm going to write the name of the ink on the sample on this Tomoe River page. So let's start with number 1. Now, I did say I had something of a prediction as to what this ink potentially could be. Well, not so much what the ink may be, but more what the brand is. And I'm gonna go out on a limb. I'm gonna say this is a Robert Oster. Now, it could be a number of Robert Osters. I was toying up between Robert Oster and Diamine, but I'm gonna go with Robert Oster. By elimination, I'm gonna go with Robert Oster. Which Robert Oster? I don't know. There are a number of these lovely, rich, darker blues that it could be. So let's open up envelope number 1. I feel like I'm an awards ceremony announcer here. So ink number 1 is, there we go, Robert Oster Thunderstorm. So why did I think it was Robert Oster? Well, Robert Oster has a particular feeling on the page and a way it writes on inks on papers like Tomoe River, where it ends up looking a little bit more muted on that paper as opposed to things like Rhodia. I don't know what it is in the makeup of the ink, but that's kind of just what happens. And he has a number of sort of blues in this sort of bluey purple grey sort of category. Could have been the blue black or Thunderstorm, or sort of any number of these darker inks. So that is Robert Oster Thunderstorm. So let's jot that one in. It's a beautiful ink. It's actually an ink I've admired for quite a while. A lot of you who know my channel will know I'm a big fan of blue-black inks, and this is one of the closest that Robert has come to like a real blue-black. I think it's even a bluer black blue-black than even his blue-black. That was confusing. But really lovely ink. Robert Oster, Thunderstorm there as number 1. And now we have number 2. This is the one that I'm pretty sure I know what this ink is. So I think it's Diamine Ancient Copper. So before we test anything, I've got it here on a colouring card, and I think if I put it next to it, you understand why I've thought that this might be Diamine Ancient Copper. Firstly, there's some interesting sort of like greeny copper sheen on the ink, which I really like. That appears here. It's that middle shading though. Like the darker shading, it's fairly sort of, I don't want to say standard, but like, you know, it's got some sort of browns in it, but it's this coppery rusty colour there in the middle. This is why I think it might be Diamine Ancient Copper. Let's see what the all-important number 2 card says from Pulp Addiction. And the winner for number 2 is Diamine Ancient Copper. And I've used this ink a lot over the years. Like, it shouldn't surprise me that I was able to pick it. It's an ink I really like that took me a while, I suppose, to actually really get to love. But once I did get to really know it, I use it a lot. And I've used it a lot sort of, not as a replacement red, but in places where I might use red, so like headlines and things like that. So this is Diamine. Lovely. So yeah. Okay, now we go on to ink number 3. There are some great yellow inks from a range of brands. But a brand I know that does yellow quite well is Van Diemen's ink in Tasmania. So this is my prediction for number 3. Here we have number 3 envelope. And number 3 ink is Van Diemen's Wattle from the Tasmania series. Love Van Diemen's ink, love all the Tasmania inks. Van Diemen's ink is made in Tasmania, and it's a brand that I have reviewed quite a number of now, and I'm also from Tasmania, so I love Van Diemen's ink. Hard to see here. I might try and get a little bit closer. But where in the writing, you actually get like a halo of the darker orange shading around the edge of the writing. And that is really, really beautiful. It's a unique ink, as I said, probably not for everyday sort of like office writing or anything like that. But as an ink for, you know, little interesting bits and pieces on the page, this is a lovely option. So we have Van Diemen's. So interesting. As I said, lovely ink with that sort of little bit of hits of shading around the edge of the ink. And, you know, lots of nice properties there as well. Then we get to inks 4 and 5, and these have both stumped me completely. I have no idea what either are. They're inks I've not used, as far as I'm aware, so it's going to be interesting to see what they are. So let's start with number 4 here in the envelope and see what it is. And number 4 ink is Conklin Dark Rust. That is interesting. I've reviewed a Conklin ink before. I think it was Denim Blue, and I quite enjoyed the ink. It was sort of like a weird sort of muted blue sort of color. This ink is interesting. The color there, it's more burgundy than I would associate with that name, but beautiful and great to have a look at an ink that really sort of has come out of the blue. Conklin is a brand that has been around in one, you know, form or shape for decades, and recently I think they were bought by you know, the brands that look after things like Monteverde and things like that. So yeah, making a range of inks. I believe there's a range of ink colors that are really quite nice, and Dark Rust is it's a lovely color. I wouldn't have picked that at all, so how fun. Great color. And then lastly, we get to ink 5. As I said, I have no idea what this is. I haven't used a whole lot of shimmer inks. And this one that shades so richly and has such beautiful sheen on it and that gorgeous shimmer, I'm just stumped. I don't know what it is. So let's see what this is. And the winner is Diamine Serendipity from the Green Edition. That makes a lot of sense. If my memory serves me correctly, the Green Edition is some of the inks. Well, Serendipity was from the 2022, I think, Inkvent calendar from Diamine. I've not done any of the Inkvent calendars. I really should. They are so much fun. But what the Inkvent calendars do is they have a range of standard inks, sheening inks, and shimmering inks, and some that are all three. So Serendipity here is, you know, a lovely green ink, tealy green ink with all that beautiful sheen and shimmer. And I have to say, I did these writing samples on here with the Serendipity pen from Robert Oster, which I also have in green. Hilarious. So Serendipity from the green edition, I think, as I said, I think that was from either the 2021 or 2022 Inkvent calendar. I'll put that in the little commenty bit below here. And now we'll just label that in here. Diamine Serendipity. You can even see there on the glass pen here, and all over my finger now, it looks quite blue. So yeah, like, but once it dries, you see that it's a tealy green, and it's really, really lovely. So I really had no chance of picking those last two. They're inks I've never used, and one from a brand I've only reviewed one ink from. But this was super interesting. I found this whole experience of doing this blind ink test to be quite fun, because when you're working with an ink that you just have no idea what it is, and you're trying to, like, if I'm doing a full review, I talk about the brand, I talk about, you know, a whole lot of things, the pricing, the this, the that. Here, I'm literally just looking at how the ink performs on the page, or pages, in fact, you know, with all these sort of, you know, other writing samples and things as well. So that was really interesting. You're observing the ink, you know, without prejudice, if you will, or without any assumption, and that's a nice thing to do. You know, obviously after a little while, I started to get an idea that I knew what this ink was, and that's only because I've used it so much. But some really lovely, you know, discoveries here as well for me. So I hope you found this video interesting and useful. This blind ink test that I did. I certainly had fun making it, and a big, massive thank you to Pulp Addiction for getting on board in such a huge and fun way to make this video possible. You know, like when I went to them with the idea, it was a much simpler, just like, oh, 5 ink samples, just don't label them, and, you know, let you know what they are after. You know, we put it in an envelope or something, and to get such beautifully presented stuff from, and really thoughtfully chosen inks, some wild cards, and then some like lovely standard inks, and from brands I really enjoy as well. If you're interested in any of these inks, they're all available, I assume, all available through Pulp Addiction here in Australia. So yes, big thank you to them. Check them out. And a big thank you to you. So please, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Hit the notifications button. If you've got products you think I should be looking at, or if you've got ideas for videos, I would love to hear from you. If you'd like to sponsor a review by providing an item for review, please get in touch. It's your support that makes this channel possible. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Once again, a big thank you to Pulp Addiction. And I'll talk to you soon.